right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're here to talk about foundational early math skills and learning trajectories. I recognize a handful of names. So for some of you, this may be a lot of confirmation for what you already know. And for others of you, this may be newer, but it might be a nice refresher to kind of think about as we're going into the school year, the types of choices we're making with our different resources and how we can support families in helping their kids be extra ready for school math as things move forward. I'm Dawn Chauvin. I'm one of the math consultants here at Wayne Brisa. I primarily focus with pre-K through fifth grade, although sometimes a little bit in the middle school area as well. And so today we're jumping in with really early math, like even before school, all the way up through third grade. So kind of that birth through third grade space. But I am going to make some connections to beyond third grade. So if you're sitting here and thinking, I really work with like fourth and fifth grade teachers or with middle school teachers, I would actually encourage you to sit through and you'll see some connections about how this can help support kids at that level as well. So thank you to anybody just joining us. We are going to kind of get rolling in content here. And I will drop the sign-in sheet again later. Again, this is being recorded. So if you are at all hesitant to have your face on the YouTube Risa video of this, you are welcome to turn your camera off. I won't take it personally. Okay. I'm going to ask you if you can access your chat function. When you think of foundational skills in early mathematics, what comes to mind? Feel free to unmute or drop it in the chat. Sure. So when you think of foundational skills in early math, what comes to mind? Seeing counting has come up, one-to-one, subitizing, shapes and patterns, number recognition, fun and joy. Yes, we hope that it is in a fun and joyous environment. And even beyond early math, measurement. All right, we are going to dive into kind of moving through with what we're talking about here today. So when we're talking early math, we're really talking like very early, like pre-K kinder, as we're thinking about these spaces, although we will talk about the connections to multiplication, division, ratios, proportions. So today we're going to look at really subitizing, which can also be pronounced subitizing. Early foundational skills in mathematics, often we're thinking forward and backward number word sequence, and that's something that parents and teachers often work on. That idea of one-to-one correspondence is very important, as well as cardinality, which is really that idea of if somebody's asking you how many, at the end you understand that that represents the quantity. We're really diving into subitizing, kind of how that truly connects to building a different part of kids' thinking around number and number sense. And so what is subitizing? It's really the ability to quickly recognize and name a group of objects without counting. What that means is like when kids are rolling dice or when adults are rolling dot dice, we don't have to touch and count each of the dots. We can recognize those and know what the number is. Things like dominoes. When you look at a domino, you automatically, your brain kind of registers what's the amount on the domino. And so that's really what subitizing is all about, is being able to visualize a quantity and very quickly without having to count it. And so what I find really interesting, and you might as well, is that subitizing and counting are both things that answer the question, how many? Yet they're distinctly different cognitive processes, and they appear in different parts of the brain. And so really when we are thinking about building kids' early math skills, we really need to work on both things because there are two different parts of the brain that are activated in two different ways that kids are thinking about number, both of which are important for their later development and understanding in mathematics. And so often in our pre-K resources and activities, as well as in our kinder resources, first grade and beyond, counting is something that's done very heavily, or thinking about skills kind of just beyond counting. But subitizing often does not get a whole lot of attention, or it's in some type of number sense routine or in type of small group activity that we may or may not skip because it often is not the core of a lesson, especially beyond kindergarten. And so really just knowing that that is an important process for kids to develop in their brains kind of gives us a deeper awareness of why we want to spend the time on that and why it's valuable to spend the time on that. So again, why does it matter? At the heart of number sense is kids' ability to see in groups and think in groups. This research came out in 1978. You'll notice my next bullet, the research is coming from 2022. So there's been a lot of research on it, and it's still a continued area of interest in research and really thinking about what is so important for early mathematicians so that kids can truly develop number sense and be successful later on in algebra. Because algebra is often a gateway where kids are either very successful or not. And a lot of what we do in pre-K and kinder spaces can really help kids set up for success. So the development of number sense is the most important mathematical accomplishment for young children. And supertizing really encompasses the ability to fluently and meaningfully and confidently use number relationships. And that's really the heart of number sense. And so that ability to supertize, the ability to see number multiple ways, helps kids develop a flexibility in their thinking and understanding and ability to recognize patterns around number. So if you're already familiar, you might know the early math essentials. If not, there's a QR code here that will take you to the early math essentials. And then at the end, I'll have a QR code that has a lot of additional resources that this will be linked to as well. It's not necessarily important that you have it in front of you right now. But as we're talking about learning trajectories, that is actually part of our early math essentials. It's essential 4. And when you look at bullets F and G, and we're thinking in terms of formative assessment, it's really about having a place to identify children's mathematical strengths and thinking about what are we going to help them develop by choosing appropriate tasks. It's also about using the knowledge of learning trajectory and the research of how kids learn mathematics and the different pathways in which they learn mathematics to really help us understand what we should be choosing and how we help them develop more sophisticated solutions. Because kids' learning trajectories don't necessarily always align with the grade level standards of our curriculum. And so being able to really look at learning trajectories as an asset-based tool to help kids get the support, scaffolds, and connections that they need can really be powerful for them identifying as mathematicians. Today, we are going to look at the Clements and Sarama learning trajectories from LT Squared. The website is fantastic. We're also going to be diving into a book that was published by NCTM within the last year, I believe, maybe even more recently than that, called Math Trajectories for Young Learners. I love this book. I can't say enough great things about this book. It really takes the learning trajectory research and gives you examples from pre-K through first, second grade classrooms. There's QR codes with videos. It really breaks things down in a very comprehensible framework. And the way that the chapters are developed, you can kind of jump into a chapter to read specifically about that learning trajectory if that's what's connecting to the content you're teaching at the moment. And so today, again, we're really just staying in the supertizing space. As you can see, there are a lot of learning trajectories that you could dive into. This website, you do need to make an account for. It's entirely free. Kids one-on-one, it will give you some small group videos and activities. There are so many free resources on this website. I cannot encourage you to go there enough. Another thing that I like about leaning into the learning trajectory space is, although today I'm referencing this learning trajectory, Math Recovery and Integro have their learning trajectories. And then if you look at the cognitively guided instruction research from Carpenter, they have learning trajectories as well. It's just about what the different research teams call the different buckets and what they call and how they break apart the student learning. In the Clements and Sarama learning trajectories, it's really designed from birth through 3rd grade. So it really breaks things apart kind of much smaller early on. And that can be really helpful for us really understanding some of the nuances and the differences and how kids might explain supertizing and how they're seeing and thinking about number early on. So there are actually 4 levels on that learning trajectory that are before 4. I'm not going to get into those in very much detail because most of us are not in our very early on classrooms of 3-year-olds and below. Most of us were pre-K, kindergarten, and beyond. And so early levels of supertizing, quantities up. Kids are innately born with a sense about quantity. Research with very little babies, where kids can kind of see and notice the difference in quantity from very early on. And so we really just want to make sure that we're aware that this is something that's developing from birth and onwards, and some of the things that we can do to really help kids. And so when we're thinking about supporting kids early on, and maybe that is you have your own kid, maybe you have grandkids you're connected to, maybe you have a neighborhood group of kids that you hang out with, or friends' kids. How do we support children's growth in very early subitizing? It's actually relatively easy. There's a few little moves that we can make that make a huge difference. So one of the things that we can do is simply say the quantity. Will you get your 2 shoes? If you're walking down the street, pulling a wagon of your kids, and you see 3 dogs across the road, pointing to the dogs, being like, hey, look, there's 3 dogs. So instead of saying, look at the dogs, look at the 3 dogs. I see 4 trees up ahead. If you have small children at home that need to clean things up, instead of saying, go pick up the blocks, go pick up the 3 blocks, go pick up the 4 blocks, go clear your 2 plates. The simple idea of just saying the quantity word along with the objects actually has huge impact. And there's specific research on that as well. And so that's one of the things you can do. Another thing you might be noticing, I don't know if you can see me along with the slides in the background. I tend to talk with my hands. So you're seeing me gesture as I'm talking about pick up the 3 blocks. Gesture is another thing very early on so that kids are understanding the quantity that you're referring to. If you are doing a read aloud with a book that has counting and quantities within it, when you're saying things like, here, look at the 2 snails in this picture, you want to kind of circle those 2 snails. So kids are really directing to see that quantity. What we're trying to do early on is point out the quantity that kids should be seeing around them. So they start noticing quantity and thinking in terms of quantity. And again, all of this is typically before age 4 and usually within quantities like 3 or below. Of course, I would encourage you to do it with numbers beyond that as well. So in the Clemenson's trauma learning trajectories, the next level is something called perceptual subitizing. And they have a range of between 4 and 5. So kids are first a perceptual subitizer to 4, and then it moves to 5. We're going to look at some examples of kids describing this dot dice image that you can see to kind of talk about a different framework for what we might hear as kids are in this perceptual subitizing space. So you might hear a child say something like, I see 4 because it looks like a square. Very early on, kids are going to describe the image that they see in terms of a shape or something familiar to them. They're not necessarily going to use that numeric language. Then you might see a child who's going to describe this as I see a 2 and a 2. They're not going to name the full quantity. They're just naming the pieces that they see. So they might say, I see a 1, a 1, a 1, and a 1, or I see a 2 and a 2. And it's going to make sense based off whatever the image is. Child 3 might be able to say something like, I see a 2 and a 2. And if they're prompted by a teacher or an adult, then they're going to tell you it's a 4. But without that additional prompting, they're not going to just automatically say it. And then somebody like child 4 is going to say something like, or it's a 2 and a 2. They have the full quantity first, and then they have the 2 pieces that make the quantity. They're likely going to do it without any additional prompting. And so as there's been more research done, and part of what's covered and part of what I like about this framework and the purple book is it kind of gives you a little bit more to listen for as a pre-K or kinder teacher. You can really listen for the different types of perceptual subitizing and kind of get an idea about how strong a child is with their subitizing skills. Not just do this and say the, but how are they describing it? Because that tells us a little bit more about how they're thinking about it. Initially, kids are really going to focus on shape and describe kind of the visuals of the shapes. Then we have perceptual subgroup subitizing. And so because kids are often very strong without a ton of intervention up to 3, they're going to start naming some subgroups. They're going to say something like, I see a 2 and a 2. If I show them a 5, they might say, I see a 4, and a 1. But they're not going to put together a total there. They haven't really this awareness of the whole number or the ability to put together small pieces to make a whole number. The next levels that you would see are perceptual ascending or descending subitizing, and total, or if they name the total first and then the subgroup. either way, they're a pretty robust perceptual supervisor if they're able to say the total and name a little bit of subgroups. And again, if you're looking more deeply in the Clemens-Serama and you're thinking I work with 4 and 5-year-olds and maybe some 6-year-olds in intervention spaces, we really want to make sure they've got the perceptual supervising down. And really that happens within 5. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that benchmark kind of ends at 5. How do we support children's growth with perceptual supervising? Because not only is it great to be able to recognize it, but then we need to know what to do with it. And so one of the things we can do is be really strategic with the images we show them. So one of the first things we can do is make sure that we're using what we call regular patterns. That's things that kids have typically seen more frequently. That's dice patterns, that's domino patterns. Now, we live in a world where tablets are more frequent. Kids are on online math games. They're doing different things. They're not really playing as much board games and dominoes as we used to see. And so now you might find things that we would assume are regular spatial patterns are things that kids need a little bit more work with because they aren't playing those dice and domino games. So if you have any ability to play some dice and domino games with young children, I highly encourage you to. And when parents ask for things that they can do at home, dice and domino games are a great way to get kids seeing those regular patterns and naming those numbers. Another thing to think about is for kids early on, especially in this perceptual supervising space, symmetrical patterns are easier for their brains to understand. So when you're first getting started, think those common dice and domino patterns and then symmetrical patterns, because there's something about the symmetry that helps their brains process the numbers. Another thing to consider is how are the dots laid out? Are they spaced really far apart? Are they too close together? We're looking for kind of a happy median so that kids can see them as individual items without having to see them too far apart. Because when they're really far apart, kids are going to lean into a space where they think they've got to count, as opposed to being able to see and visualize and process. And supervising is really about building that visual awareness of quantity. And then the final way, and this can be a fun one to do or an easy one to do, is use sound. How many did you hear? Quick, easy routine. That's something you can pull out just before, as you're lining up to go to, or before recess. Or if that's your classroom management system thing, you can ask the kids after, how many claps did you hear, and change it up. Another way to do things like this is if you have plastic cups and they're doing sort of different activities where they're dropping plastic cubes inside and it makes a sound, you can ask kids, how many cubes did I drop? And so not only do we do it visually, there's also that auditory component that helps kids kind of develop that understanding of quantity in both spaces. This is huge. It doesn't seem huge to us as adults, but there is a major shift in kids' development when they go from perceptual supervising to conceptual supervising. This is a major milestone for their numerical development. Conceptual supervising really involves recognizing and reasoning with quantities as a composite of smaller groups. What does that mean? It essentially means that the conceptual supervising process is being able to perceptually supervise small quantities and then mentally put them together. It's really the foundation of part-whole understanding. It's seeing larger quantities as smaller groups and being able to put them together and take them apart with images of quantity. And that really helps kids start thinking about different ways to break apart and put together a number. And so that's such a huge thing. To us, it doesn't seem like a big deal if we're, as adults, looking at an image that's flashed of 7 or 8. And it's a skill that kids have to develop. And we have to help them develop that. When you look at the Clemens and Serama trajectories, they break apart the ranges into conceptual supervising to 5, then to 7, then to 10, then to 20. And the reason that they do that is really because they want to make sure that kids know all the different combinations in between. So for example, we often work with 5s and 10s in our lessons in kindergarten and first grade. It's a very foundational to our place value system. So kids might know all their combinations to 10, but if they don't know their combinations within an 8 or within a 9, we would say that they're conceptual supervisor to 7. And so just kind of keeping that in mind, that to truly be at a level of conceptual supervising to 10, any combination we're throwing at them, they should be able to quickly recognize and describe. This is the most foundational foundational thing that we can be doing to help kids have part whole understanding. What I like about this purple book, when it gave some frameworks for the perceptual subitizing, it also gave some framework for conceptual subitizing, just some things that we might listen for. Unlike perceptual subitizing, this time around, there's only two categories. And I think they're very logically named. So it can be a little helpful for us about trying to remember where kids are at. So if we're looking at the first image, which is pretty typical dice pattern, this child might say, I see a 5, it's a 2, and a 1. So they're saying like the 2, a 2, and the 1 in the middle. But then for this image, they're going to say, I see a 5, I see a 2, and a 1. And maybe that makes sense then. Maybe they did see a 2, and a 1, but they've described it the exact same way. And in all likelihood, if we show them a different image of 5, we're going to explain it as a 2, and a 1 again. Because they can think of 5 as only one way that it's being put. In this case, is going to give a very specific example to the image. So I see a 5, I see a 4, and there's a 1 in the middle. Or when they see this image, they might say, I see a 5, I see a 3 on the top and the 2 on the bottom. And so we see this differentiation in kind of how kids are explaining it. And that can really help us as teachers, as we're listening to their explanations, think about how strong they are with their subitizing at that level and with that number. And so children that explain it the exact same way, like the child in example 1, we consider them a rigid conceptual subitizer, which means they're kind of earlier on in their understanding of conceptual subitizing. They have an idea that 5 can be broken apart and can be put back together, but they're not going to make it always make sense to the image. They have kind of one way of thinking about 5. Whereas somebody who is a flexible conceptual subitizer, they have a variety of different ways. Are you doing number talks with dot images or doing subitizing with flashing cards? If you think about your kids that are able to explain it in a way that always makes sense for the picture, those are your kids that are flexible conceptual subitizers. Your kids that have a favorite way to explain it and explain it that way every time, they're likely in that rigid space and need a little bit more help making connections to the quantity and the way it's displayed and their description. Because we really want them to see number as a variety of combinations, because that's what's building their part whole understanding. And that's foundational for addition and subtraction and beyond. Same question again. So how do we support a child's growth with conceptual subitizing? There are a few things you can do. If you're familiar with our essentials, using dot image number talks, great way to do this. We're exposing kids to those images. We're talking about the different ways we can support children's growth in conceptual subitizing. Dot image number talks are a great way to do that. There's a lot of resources that I can point you to if you're unfamiliar with those. Our essentials are a great way to start. We can talk about a little bit how things like tens frames provide structure for kids to help see number. It helps them think of things as 5 and then some, or 10, take away some. Or depending on if you're using it, you can fill it in from one side or the other and get kids oriented towards double. So there's a lot of different ways we can do that. I'm looking at my timing. I was going to show the bunny ears video. I think I'll just make sure you guys have the link at the end. Bunny ears is a great activity too. We have kids use their hands like bunny ears, and we say things like, show me 5, show me 5 another way. And it really helps kids kind of get this routine going down. It's also a really nice one to pull out in the car or while you're waiting in line. It can be a very quiet activity if you are in a building where it's important that kids are quiet in the hallway and you're waiting outside for music or art or whatever other you can really pull out quickly, and does a lot of work on subitizing in a very short amount of time, as well as gives you a quick visual about the kids that need to look at their hands before they're putting them up, or the kids that are only able to show you 5 one way. And it really is a nice quick assessment for us to know where our students are at. In a moment, an image is going to flash on the screen. And although we are not in person together, so I'm not really running it like a true number talk, this is not going to be that dissimilar to what a number talk would be. I'm going to flash something on the screen, and I want you to tell me how many did you see and how did you see them. I'm I'm going to go pretty quickly because I do want you to have to think about it. Um, so if you are not looking at your phone or your screen, now is the time I would suggest doing it. And I'm going to flash it in 3, 2, 1. How many did you see and how did you see them? Okay. Most of you, and I think I am going to be able to do this easily with my tools, said you saw 7. Most of you with a 4 and a 3. And part of that was design on my end. I wanted it laid out like a traditional 4 pattern and a 3 pattern. So our brains are pretty instantly putting that together. For small children, this is a newer skill for them. They have to kind of stop and think about it, and you would likely give them more time. Intentionally, I have this image grouped like a regular dice pattern and kind of like a triangle so that it's things that are familiar to kids as you're getting started. This would be an image I would use early on when I'm trying to build conceptual supervising. If we had a child with us today, you might still hear kids say like a 2, a 2, a 2, and a 1 if they're early on in supervising. You might see various different explanations for it. And I'm always surprised when I hear kids because it's often not a way I would think about it. To us as adults, that's very clearly a 4 and a 3. This one I'm not going to do as a number talk with a flash, but one of the other things you can do, especially early on, is use color as a tool to help kids see. If you want somebody to see a 7 as a 4 and a 3, having the 4 one color and a 3 another color is really going to help. And so that's just one of the couple of tools that you can use to build early conceptual supervising. So this is just within 7. Conceptual supervising can go all the way up to 20 in the Clemens and Serrano learning trajectory. But it is a core foundational skill to help kids see that part whole understanding. And often your resources are going to do a really nice job of showing things 5 oriented and 10 oriented. It's those other combinations that kids don't see as often that it can be really important to start pulling to make sure that they're seeing the various ways it can be constructed. And I forgot I had this, so I kind of already answered this question. Color is an amazing tool for helping kids see the groupings we want them to see. It also, from a formative assessment lens, can give us some understanding about whether kids are seeing it that way anyway, or how flexible kids are with their conceptual supervising. Are they very rigid and they're going to name it a way that doesn't make sense for the picture? Or do they have a way to name it for the picture and 3 other different ways that they could explain it? Other picture. Same routine. How many did you see? How did you see them? I'll flash them in 3, 2, 1. How many did you see? How did you see them? Now we're getting some diversity. Okay. 4 people have said they saw an 8. 1 person saw a 4 and a 4. Oh, if this is the wrong 4, please feel free to correct me. Did you see like this 4? And then this 4? Yes. Okay. So you saw it as a 4 and a 4. Jennifer and Sarah saw it as a 3, and a 2. So let me see if I'm going to get this right because you're not here with me. If you are doing this with kids, they will correct you. They will like tell you if you're doing it wrong or you didn't pick the right 3. And Sarah and Jennifer, it's also possible that you picked different 3s, and 2s. So did we see a 3 here, a 3 here, and then a 2 over here?
Almost. You got the yellow one right for me. This is
Okay.
Jennifer. And then I almost saw it like a less than sign. So then the
Mm,
other three is the bottom three, and then the two up top, yes, is
okay. Thank you, Jennifer. So you saw the three like a less than, and then the two right
yes.
here.
Yep. Hmm.
And Sarah saw this left. Okay. In the top left. I know my left and right. It just takes me a second. Okay. And then the three on the top. And then the two. Was that right, Sarah? Yep. Okay. Thomas, you also have that you saw a three, and a two. Did you see it the same way as these two, or was your you can get the idea from a group of adults. Same orientation. Okay. All of our brains process it a little bit differently by having them a little bit more spaced out. And at this point, if I'm working with kids that are a little further along the subitizing trajectory, there's a lot of different ways that they're going to see this and process this and put this together. One of the nice things about this is that it shows kids that there's different ways to get to the same right answer. We know that there are eight, but we all saw it a little bit differently, or some of us saw it differently. And that's okay that our brains work a little bit differently. We're getting those images, we're putting it together, we're still getting the eight, but we have different ways that our brains connect those visuals. And that can be really important early on for kids to kind of get this understanding of, yes, there might be a right answer, but we might have different pathways of getting to it. And my pathway has value, even if it wasn't the exact same way that my neighbor did it. Okay. We have another image that I'm going to show you. This one, we're not going to dive in as deep with the explanation, and I'm not going to leave it up for quite as long, but same prompt. How many did you see? How did you see them? And again, we're still within that conceptual subitizing range. How many did you see and how did you see them? All right. It was eight again, but it was, I think, for many of you to see eight. I have two people that explain their thinking as a eight because it was a tens frame and there were two missing, or a 10 minus two explanation. And so that's one of the ways you might have thought about it. Another way is using that tens frame structure of, well, I saw the five top, and then there were three more. Students that might still be struggling a little bit with their counting, especially if you're doing this in kindergarten. If they know that there's a five on top, and then they only have to worry about getting the number on the bottom or the number that are missing from the bottom to kind of put together the total of 10. And so having this additional structure can be really helpful. And again, I answered our reflection question. How can using structures like tens frames help build conceptual subitizing? It really helps kids organize the dots and start thinking in an organized manner. Um, Usually tens frames are pretty familiar because they're in most curriculums at this point. And so it's a familiar structure for them. Plus it links nicely to our base 10 system. And so using color and using structures can really help kids develop conceptual subitizing and develop further flexibility. Because no matter how that image, as long as you group with more than three, that's great formative assessment data about their thinking, as well as helps us know where they are on this trajectory within the number range, as well as how flexible they are with their conceptual subitizing. And so again, and I'll keep coming back to why this matters, because it is very deep in the research that this matters a whole lot. Conceptual subitizing is considered an advanced number competency. It enables children to flexibly decompose and reason about number. to be efficient with addition and subtraction, and later multiplication and division. Kids need to have that flexibility. They also found that advanced number competencies, which conceptual subitizing is, being a strong in areas conceptual subitizing, that elementary, that flexibility that it builds for kids with number is huge. Children with advanced skills, which is that conceptual subitizing, really outperform kids that have the basic skills of just verbal counting, perceptual subitizing. And remember, perceptual subitizing is really kind of within five. It's things that our brains can process as one unit. Um, really set kids up for success. Foundational this is to make sure that you have room and time and spaces to build subitizing in, and it doesn't take long. I'm not saying spend 20 minutes a day on this. I'm saying build in a 5-minute routine throughout your day, throughout your week, pull it out as a we're waiting in line activity. There's lots of ways to get kids doing this. And another thing to kind of keep in mind is when you're looking at lessons in your curricular resource, it is often easy to look at a lesson where the goal is subitizing, but provide scaffolds in such a way that we end up just having kids count. And it is really important that they are also doing that work of subitizing, because again, it's a different area of their brain that it's activating, and it is very foundational for their part whole understanding. And so you've either patiently been sitting with me for 40 minutes as an upper elementary teacher wondering, okay, listen, I don't teach pre-K or kinder. Why am I here? Or listen, I teach upper elementary. There's already more than I can teach in a given day. How does this connect to what I'm doing? Hopefully in this next bit of time, I'm going to be able to answer those questions for you. So inside that purple book, another term is introduced that is really kind of foundational, second, third, fourth, fifth grade and beyond, which is groupitizing. And you might be familiar with this term already. It originated cognitive science research on how the brain processes numerical quantity. And it refers to the mental ability to quantify a large set of items by organizing. And so we've kind of gone from perceptual subitizing, which is starting to recognize a group, to conceptual subitizing, which is putting a few pieces together to make a slightly larger group, still usually within 20, to this idea of groupitizing, which is, okay, I can see that I've got these groups. There's 4 of them, like kind of like in a dice pattern, and there's 3 in each group. So my brain is thinking about, okay, 3, 3, 3, 3. It connects to skip counting. It connects to early multiplication. And often we kind of move away from images. Moving forward, as kids are moving beyond, we kind of take away some of the quantity images, and making sure that we still build those in is going to be really important. Because not only is it the conceptual shift to go from perceptual subitizing to conceptual subitizing, it's another shift to go to groupitizing. We are going to do a quick image flash with this one. It is a groupitizing image. Therefore, I'm going to leave it up for quite a bit longer. And when you're doing this type of image with kids, you might end up just leaving it on the board or leaving it up for quite a few times or flashing it more than just once for them. Because again, especially early on, it's a lot for their brains to process. It's a pretty big jump depending on your group and your picture. Our 2 focus questions again are, how many did you see? And how did you see them? Or how did you think about them? The image is on the screen. How many did you see? And how did you see them? I'm seeing a lot of reference to 9 times 4 is 36 and some different explanations along the way. So Christina just gave me a 9 times 4 is 36. So I'm guessing that meant that you recognized, um, oh, 3 times 3 times 4. Okay.
Yeah, I edited it because I was thinking, well, yeah, it was 9 times 4, but actually, how did I see the nine? I saw the nine as a 3 times 3. So I went back and
Okay.
adjusted
So
that.
thank you. Because I was like, wait a second. I swear I was just reading
No,
this
I
head.
know. No, no, no,
Okay.
no. I edited it. Sorry.
Okay. So you saw like a 3 and a 3 here and realized that meant that there were 9.
Nine
And then
groups.
you saw 4 in each, which then ultimately gave you the 9 times 4. Okay. So that's one way you might have thought about it. Okay. Another person, so 3 rows and 3 columns that each have 4. So Jill, it sounds like you thought of it somewhat similarly to Kristan here. Notice I'm using color to kind of help everybody see. And then, of course, if I am misrepresenting your thinking, please jump on and correct me. So 4 times 3, so 12 in each row. Okay, so you thought about it in terms of rows. So I thought of that as 12, and another 12, and another 12, which then gave you the same 36. Lots of like the 3 times 3 with the groups of 4 making 36. So getting to kind of that 9 or repeating the 12 and the 12 and the 12. All of those are great strategies. They both represent multiplicative thinking and additive thinking. And this really helps kids think about connecting multiplication. This image is really nice because, well, part of the reason why I chose this image was very intentional. It is kind of that 9 domino pattern. So that's a familiar pattern. It's a little bit easier for our brains to process, as well as the 4s, a dice pattern or a domino pattern. So again, those were 2 familiar patterns that I used, which makes this a little bit easier, especially when we're starting to get kids thinking in groups. We want to lean into using more of those familiar patterns at that point. I am watching time and I am realizing with the time we have left, I'm going to skip our next image to make sure we get through. Oops. To make sure we get through to where I'd like us to get through today. I had one more grouping image, but the idea really was to kind of have a conversation around this is a really nice way to help kids think about some of the multiplication strategies you might use in a visual way. So if you are a 4th or a 5th grade teacher and struggling with certain facts, this can be a nice way to help it make sense. So if you do a number talk around the 9 times 4 and the 36, and then you present the next picture in teal, there's an opportunity for a lot of connections about how kids are thinking about this. You are likely to have a child that is thinking about the fact that, okay, this is one less group of 4, and you can make some connections that way. You might still have kids that are counting each group independently or seeing it as a group of 3, a group of 3, 3 4s, 3 4s, and then 2 4s. So there's a whole lot of different ways that kids are going to explain and reason around this. But what it's doing is making multiplication very visual for them, and helping them to think about kind of skip counting with 4s, which is not something we do a whole lot, but is often a very useful skill to have before kids are really able to, or before they might have their multiplication facts memorized. So taking the time to do these visual images with repeated groups to build that groupatizing, second grade and up, can be really, really helpful. And again, there was a little bit of a shift with how we presented it. I left it up for longer. I was really about the patterns that I'm picking and how I'm organized. Not to say you can't pick a random picture one day and have a great conversation around it, but the more strategic we are about it and how it connects and how we're using our time, the more impact we can have. Our final terminology here is unitizing. And so we've gone from perceptual subitizing to conceptual subitizing, which was a shift. And then again, from groupatizing to unitizing. The way that this book in particular refers to it is that it's similar to groupatizing, but unitizing is actually a more advanced cognitive process. And it's really this idea, and you may have seen it in other research texts about like the concept of tenness. So this ability to see instead of a 10 stick or as one group that you can use and move forward and backwards to, as opposed to 10 individual items. And that's a huge shift for kids. That is something that makes multiplication, the understanding of this makes conceptual understanding for place value and for multiplication a much lower cognitive load than it is if I have to think about counting those as 10 ones. And so this is a huge shift, and not all kids get there. And part of how we can help them get there is making sure we are bringing in those visuals and having them really think through what something is representing so that they have the mental imagery to fall back on. So that when they're thinking of a 10, they're kind of picturing the entire unit. And there's a little picture of a family here because in the book, they give the lovely real world example that like family might have 4 people in it. So you've got 4 individuals, but it's thought of as one family in the same way that like a tens cube is thought of as one 10, but it's made up of 10 ones. Yeah, using the base 10 images for subitizing, you know exactly where I'm going, Carrie. So we are going to do one more subitizing activity that's really kind of centered on this unitizing. Although I'm not actually using the base 10 images, I'm going to use something else. I'm going to flash it pretty quickly for you all as adults. I would not flash it this quickly with a group of 2nd graders or a group of 1st graders or a group of 3rd graders. So again, an image is going to flash. And I'm going to look for how did you see it? And how many did you see? And in this case, there might not be a ton of diversity in how we're seeing it. How many did you see? And how did you see them? Yeah, we had 6 full 10s frames and 4 ones. So it's 64 or 60 and 4 more, depending on where your grade level might be and how they would explain it. 6 times 10 plus 4, you could write it more algebraically. There's a lot of different ways that we can represent the writing to explain the thinking on this, depending on your grade level and what your end goal is. These are really nice to use early on for kids to really start thinking in units because they start realizing, wait, I don't have to count 10. That is just a 10. So I can say 10. This can also be very nice. Many children, I'm sure you've had a similar experience where you might have a class count this or have some kids count this, and you're going to hear them say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, 90, 100. When you do an image like this, you can flash it. You can take correct answers on the board, or you can take kids that have 64 and there are going to be some kids that have 100. And so they can kind of talk with their partner about what they saw and how they thought about it. And then you as a class can kind of go through why 64 makes sense. Or what would it look like if we really did have 100? And there's a lot of really important mathematical conversations you can have about this that don't take a whole lot of time. Like we're talking within 3 to 5 minutes. I know your time is very limited and very valuable. And so we already have enough to get through. If we're a little bit more intentional with what's there and how we use our time, we can have a really huge impact. So we started off perceptual subitizing. That is a very early math skill. It's being able to see and recognize a quantity within 4 to 5, typically, all the way, you can go all the way from 1 to 5. There's different ways that kids might explain it, first starting by what it looks like. And then they might say the different combinations. And then at the very end, they're either saying the total and then combinations or combinations and then the total. From there, we're shifting into conceptual subitizing. And this is where the quantity is slightly larger. For us as adults, it seems like our brain is processing this as one quantity, but it's actually not. We're like seeing smaller subgroups, but our brain puts it together so instantaneously. Kids have to learn how to do this. Part of how we do that is using tools like tens frames to help them organize their thinking, using color and regular spatial patterns. And those are both ways to really help build that conceptual subitizing, which is an advanced number competency, which builds part whole understanding, which has been shown to have the greatest impact, even in later elementary. From there, if you're able to conceptually subitize, groupitizing, using larger groups and iterating them more often, right? This is that real foundational for multiplicative thinking. It's making multiplication and division visual. It is really, really helpful for kids to kind of understand what they're doing when we're doing things like skip counting or what the purpose is. It leads to great conversations about efficiency and why certain strategies might be more helpful in certain situations. And there's a variety of different ways we can do this, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time. And then the most advanced competency out of all of it really is that idea of unitizing. And that's really that concept you sometimes hear of tenness. It is so foundational to place value and to multiplication and division. And so all of this work is hugely important for helping kids build the visual memory, the visual imagery, the space of their brain that's going to be thinking about quantity in a visual sense, to connect with a part whole understanding. And to connect with, as we're starting to write numbers, as we're starting to write equations, as we're starting to do problem solving, how do we represent that? How do we make sense of that? And helping kids have a wide variety of ways to visualize number helps them to be the most flexible and the most successful they can be. So again, if we're thinking ways you can think to help kids with skip counting, visualizing for multiplication division, iterating groups. So like repeating that group of 4, that ability to do iterating with whole number, really for fractions as kids get to unit fractions and have to iterate them. It also gives kids an opportunity to notice patterns, which connects to algebraic reasoning. It also gives them opportunities to reflect on efficiency. So once you have a couple of kids share strategies, there might be ones that are more efficient or less efficient. So kind of think through, okay, does it make sense in a picture like our 36 that was made by the 4s set up like a 9 to count everything by ones? Or does it make more sense to kind of look for groups that we can use to help us out? And then building that conceptual understanding of place value. There are kids that are going to be that do not understand place value. They've memorized a procedure. And so when we start building in some of this visual, even for the kids that might seem like they know what they're doing, this helps them understand why they're doing it. And so if they forget a step over the summer, they're less likely to forget what it looks like and how to connect it. And so we're going for deeper meaning here by building both parts of the brain that answer that question, how many? And I have 3 minutes left. So how can we support families? That's Essential 8. I have some resources on the QR code that I will send to you. I highly recommend DREME, Family Math. There's a ton of resources and I can give to families that are connected to early math. Little things like having conversations about just naming the quantity and modeling that. Huge impact, especially if they have little kids. Encouraging dice and domino games. If you have math nights and you can give those things out because you have a little extra money and a certain budget that's meant for that, do it. Hugely impactful. And introducing dot images and other sorts of routines game to families. Quick fun thing when they're sitting in that line doing pickup or drop off, easy peasy way to practice with their young ones. QR code here for additional resources. It is a Word document. I will also drop that in the chat. More open-ended. You can see some videos about the various levels. There's games and activities you can pull from it, or you might find that some of these games and activities already exist or something similar exists in your resources to begin with. So again, thank you for joining me today. It's formerly Math Recovery, now called Integro. So there's Numeracy Foundations and AVMR2. If you're like, number talks are new to me, EIP6 seems interesting. We offer the number sense routine number talk courses that also goes along with dot images. That's 4 times a year. That's on your own time. The cost is really just for the book associated with it. And then if you're in a leadership role, elementary math leaders can be a really nice It's a wonderful network of people that are working away. And then we have 1 more minute. So here is my contact information. Thank you for joining me today live. Thank you if you're watching this after the fact. I appreciate you being here and engaging with me. And I hope you're taking something away that you can support teachers with or use in your practice as you are going back to school this fall. Thank you, everybody.